Welcome to the Front Office Exchange, where we take a look at the careers of executives and rising stars within the sports business. Now here's your host, Jake Failing.
This is episode 10 of the Front Office Exchange podcast. We've got a special show today. We've got two guests instead of one. You'll hear from Jason Wilmoth and Will Baggett, both of whom are with IMG College. And, I thought since I talked to them about the same time, they're with the same company, they're both rising stars in the industry, although they are at different points in their careers. I thought it would be a unique opportunity to put them together into one dual episode. Jason and I go back all the way to college. He and I both worked in the athletic department at UNC. He's been in sports ever since, and we worked actually pretty closely together for a while when I was with USA Baseball and he was with the Tampa Bay Rays. We'd see each other at events and stay in touch that way. He's now obviously with IMG College, and he's in the Winston-Salem office, which is his hometown. So he talks about how his career, both personally and professionally, has ended up where he is now, and he's leading a successful career there, and obviously he's very happy personally being in his hometown. And I had never met Will Baggett before we spoke. I saw he was very active on social media. He's heavily involved with Front Office Sports. If you're into sports business and you're not following them, you should be sure to check them out. And he's also got a book out right now called The Blueprint, which is really geared toward early career development for entry-level, recent graduates, people getting into the sports industry that have a lot of questions. He just graduated from Baylor's sports management graduate program, and he's a coordinator for IMG College's office down in Atlanta. If I had my act together even remotely as well as he does right out of school, I would have been dangerous. It was a really good conversation. He's a really impressive guy. When I created this podcast, I wanted to focus on the careers of senior level executives, but I also wanted to hit on rising stars as well. And I touched on this a little bit. Both of them fall into that latter category, but they are at different points in their career as well. So I think no matter where you are in your career, if you're listening, you'll get something out of this. They both provide really unique perspectives. And it's Jason's advice that he gives at the end of his conversation with me. And you'll hear Will go first and then Jason. But his advice is, it's about playing the point game. And I won't give you too much more information. I want to tease it a little bit, but I encourage you to stick around to the end of our conversation because that's what really stuck with me from all the advice that he passed along. So without further ado, again, you'll hear Will Baggett first and then Jason Wilmoth, but both of them are with IMG College, and I hope you enjoy the show. Will Baggett, welcome to Front Office Exchange. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Jake. Thanks for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be on.
You got it. Well, I'm happy to have you on. I mean, I look at what you're doing on social media and outside of social media, and I'm like, wow, when I was 1 year out of college or 2 years, if I had it together like you did, I think I would be in a different position. I mean, you look like you're a busy man.
Yeah, and sometimes I can make it seem more busy than I am, but social media is just such a great tool, and in this day and age, if you aren't using it, you're really cutting yourself short. But I owe a great deal of gratitude to Front Office Sports, whom I contribute to on a monthly basis, and a lot of other people whom I've watched and watch how they attack social media and how they execute their different plans and strategies. So it's definitely just being observant and just taking advantage of the opportunities that have been presented to me.
Well, you touched on Front Office Sports, and I want to get there other than the fact that we share very similar names, which is funny. But why don't you go back for me how you got into your role there with IMG, when you got that sports bug. I think just a little bit more background on you. When I started this podcast, I wanted to focus on, senior level executives, but also rising stars in the industry. And I think, what you're doing and what you've done so far, even and correct me if I'm wrong, 1 year, 2 years out of school is really impressive, and you seem like you're on the right track. So if you could go back for me, when you really started to lock in there before you graduated, it looks like you got some internships and then leverage those into your current full-time role.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I really appreciate the acknowledgement and distinction as a rising star because there are so many talented people that are in this industry and so many unsung heroes. So to be among that class of individuals is truly a blessing and very humbling. But I got started out at the University of Mississippi where I got my undergrad degree in exercise science. And at that time, I was strength and conditioning. I was working as an Olympic strength and conditioning coach. And oddly enough, I didn't watch my first college football game until maybe 2008, 2009. So the sports bug, I always had it kind of more so for basketball, but I started transitioning over to the football side of things. And I moved on from University of Mississippi to Baylor University, where I became the first graduate assistant at the AFCA since 2004. And I was working in the education division, and that was a very serendipitous position that came open at a time when I needed a graduate assistantship to take care of my tuition. Baylor's tuition is not a drop in the bucket by any stretch of the imagination. And also with that role, I also started working with Baylor Athletic Performance, and that taught me a great deal about what it takes to operate at a championship level at all times, and really just going the extra mile. And although I wanted to stay on the business side of sports, the discipline, time management, accountability, all those different things, those intangibles, what I got from the experience, have served me very well in my career. I moved on from Baylor University to the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl I did an internship there to complete my degree requirements, and that was a great opportunity. And you learn a lot about the bowl system, especially kind of be on that periphery and working with so many different teams, and you're not knowing who's going to be in your game until 3 weeks before when the rest of the country finds out. And that was the inaugural year of the college football playoffs, so it was very exciting times, and we were really just thrown in the fire, and we had to essentially work with the senior level executives kind of on the same wavelength, because they didn't know what was coming, neither did we. So we really had to be proactive and see around corners and be able to put out those fires to really execute the game at a high level. And finally, moving over to where I am now, my current position with IMG, and I particularly work for the Collegiate Licensing Company, which is a subdivision of IMG, and was started by Coach Bill Battle back in 1981. And I was able to get this position due to relationships I had at the Peach Bowl. Having done a good job there as an intern, they called over for me, and the rest is history. And we all know how that works and the importance of relationships, but really having those people put their jerseys on my back, it really served me well to lock in this opportunity.
Sure. How was the graduate experience for you? I know we've talked about that with some past guests, just in terms of what that senior level executive, if they recommend that. I went through that program. I got about halfway through before my wife and I moved to North Carolina, but at NYU, and even in the 2 years that I was there, I built a pretty special network. So, was that a plan for you all along? And either way, what value did you gain from that?
Sure. The graduate experience for me, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, and it really helped me get ahead of the curve, because professionally there were some things I just did not know and did not understand, and I really required the assistance of a mentor to get to where I needed to be on those fronts. And you get that coursework. That coursework is very important, but also the relationships I built through AFCA, and I know I'm very blessed to have had that opportunity, because we work with so many different entities and so many different individuals, whether it ranged from the NCAA to NFL to actual institutions. And having an opportunity to be around FBS head coaches and sitting in on meetings, that was an invaluable experience, and I picked up a lot of relationships from there. So if someone is contemplating going through a graduate program, I would look at the options, because you could obviously go into the workforce and start gaining that requisite experience, and it's very important. However, if you can get paid for, like I was able to do and so many other people do, then I would highly recommend it, because you're getting that pertinent work experience at the same time as an advanced degree. And in this day and age, a master's degree is quickly becoming something like a bachelor's. So you definitely want to increase your knowledge base as best you can. And also did a lot of research there. So just learning and that experiential knowledge on multiple fronts and having it in different areas is what helped me. And also started the Sport Management Association at Baylor to help other students get involved and learn about what was in sports and what was available to them in that Central Texas area.
Right. So you've got that network in your back pocket. And then the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And my early career was in internships around events as well. And I always recommend that to people coming out of school, because when you work an event, not only are you working for that company, but you're also working alongside the different vendors. You've got a million people that are asking you for favors or for help or something like that. So you get to touch a lot of areas under the sports business umbrella. Speak to that experience a little bit. And it sounds like you were able to leverage that one way or another into your current role at IMG.
Oh, absolutely. And if you've ate lunch in the last month or so, I'm sure at some point you ate Chick-fil-A, and you know how they do things.
Buddy, I've got 3 kids under 7. I'm at Chick-fil-A. It's daily. I mean, you're talking about once a week. Come on now. I'm there. I'm either in the playground myself trying to pull them out of some of the tubes and stuff in there, or it's just like an IV into all of our arms in my family. It's unbelievable.
I can understand that, and I have some friends over at Chick-fil-A that will be very, very pleased to hear that, so I'll be sure to share that with them.
Did I just get free Chick-fil-A out of this?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Okay, all right. I won't hold you to it, Will.
We'll talk offline, and I'll be sure to let you know.
All right, appreciate it.
But yeah, it was a great experience working with Chick-fil-A particularly, and obviously there were a lot of other vendors and people that serve to make the Peach Bowl what it is. But then particularly, everyone knows that they do everything at a first-class level. From when you walk into a Chick-fil-A, no matter if you're in Mississippi or up to the Midwest or in Northeast, there's consistency. And having the benefit of having them here in Atlanta and coming into our offices on a regular basis to explain their strategies and their approaches and how they really just get that first-class service and how it's consistent across the board, that was invaluable. And we took a lot of those principles and we use them in our approach to really improve the fan experience. And working with those people was just great. And I still maintain relationships with them when I go back and volunteer for the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And I always kind of make my way up to the volunteer room and make sure I get a few sandwiches to kind of, bring back the nostalgia of working for the bowl. So it was awesome.
And that's all it is, right? Just the nostalgia. It's not the
that's it.
The spicy chicken. All right. I'm a huge fan in case that order does come through. All right. So you had a great experience there, and now you're at IMG. You touched on that a little bit. How's agency life? That's a large firm, like you said, a lot of acquisitions. They've got offices all over the country. So I'm sure they're, for someone like you who may be more open to, relocation, upward mobility, things like that. What opportunities are there for you, and how's your experience been?
Yeah, very good. So the agency experience has been very different. And coming from a football operations background, largely with the AFCA and also the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, this was a new endeavor, and it was something that I found that was interesting. And I wanted to diversify my experience a little bit to make myself a more marketable candidate for upward mobilities, such as you mentioned. But here with a company such as IMG, the good thing about it is it's a huge conglomerate of a lot of different functions and opportunities and services they provide. Here with the licensing agency, it's really a niche business, and really getting in and experiencing the learning curve was something that was humbling to me, because you see this completely new revenue stream or this service that serves as a good bottom line factor to a lot of universities, and you understand how it begins to work. But largely, working with IMG in general, you have opportunities to become an account executive or general manager. And we're owned by William Morris Endeavor, which is a huge talent agency in California. So you think about those opportunities. So just being in this network internally and doing your job at a high level will open up many, many doors if you obviously build those relationships and take care of what's entrusted to you at this time. So I feel extremely, extremely blessed to be in this position now, and I'm looking forward to continuing my tenure here and meeting more great people throughout the company.
Yeah, so educate me a little bit. I think I told you before we started recording that I'm combining this episode with my interview with Jason Wilmoth, who is, I know, with IMG College as well. I know you're on the licensing side. So he's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. You're in the Atlanta area. How do your offices work together, or maybe they don't? Just to give people listening maybe a peek inside what's it like for a large agency and how the different offices communicate.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, WME, William Morris Endeavor, is based in California. They're the head honchos. And then we have IMG Global, which is based in New York. And then we have IMG College, which is in Winston-Salem. And then we have this branch of CLC here in Atlanta. So obviously we fall under the IMG College division, and that's in my purview, that's largely where it kind of begins and ends, us being under this umbrella. But we do have those resources at our disposal to work with a lot of different brands. And the good thing about it is that you have kind of the MMR side, the multimedia rights side, and we're sometimes able to leverage those multimedia rights and those partnerships to say, hey, let us represent you on the licensing side as well. So it doesn't seem as a la carte as it could be with some other agencies. So that's a really good thing to help leverage. So when those guys at IMG College in Winston-Salem, and even in our offices here, because we have some representatives here, when they're doing a great job on the MMR side and they're renewing partners, that makes it a lot easier for us to come in on the licensing side and say, hey, let's also pick up this business as well, and then you have consistency across the board instead of dealing it out to a number of different agencies and having to work with so many different people. So that consistency and that internal support and largely internal competition, it serves to all make us better.
Sure. All right, so that's your 9 to 5 or your 8 to 7, or I'm sure your hours are crazier than 9 to 5. But all right, now let's talk about the side hustles. Now, most people may have one. I mean, you've got a couple going on here. So let's start first with Front Office Sports, which great name. I love the name. No, it's funny. I started the podcast, and then as I kept doing my homework, I said, wow, these guys really have a good thing going on. Similar name. I guess that can't hurt me as I try to get this off the ground. But, love what you do over there. So one quick kind of high point notes on what Front Office Sports is and what your role is there.
Absolutely. So Front Office Sports, it began with some students at the University of Miami. And they had a vision for helping young professionals in the sports industry. And it has grown into a much larger platform now. We've increased our verticals, and we've obviously got some sponsors in now, and we've turned into more of a kind of digital, more kind of all-encompassing publishing platform for young professionals and even tenured professionals in this business. So we've been fortunate to see our reach grow over time. But my role is I'm an entry-level development contributor. I'm all about the young professionals and really getting them up to speed because I had a lot of assistance, a lot of help getting started in my career, so I want to make sure to pass along that information. So I contribute on a monthly basis, and I did a Snapchat takeover for the Chick-fil-A kickoff game and got a great response from that. And that was my first time ever using Snapchat, but people said they couldn't tell, so I was very, very pleased to hear that. But that's kind of my high-level involvement. We're a team of about 20, and we just have outstanding people across the country. And the funny thing about it is none of us have really ever met in person, aside from maybe 2 or 3 of us.
In IRL, in real life.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, in real life.
You always. Right. It's amazing. I did another podcast when I lived in Raleigh that was not sports related, but I remember we brought on a guest who was invited by my co-host, and the guest walked in and they shook hands. He's like, "Oh, it's great to meet you. Great to find." I'm like, "What?" So it just goes to show that again, social media can help you build relationships, almost just as well as face to face. So yeah, and that was one of my questions. It looks like for the most part, most of the contributors like yourself are in this kind of remote field-based role that they do on the side. Are there full-time employees for Front Office Sports?
Not at this point, but that's the goal ultimately.
Sure.
To bring everybody on full time, and we're led by an outstanding leader, CEO Adam White, who I believe is I think he may be a senior now in Miami. So that's been a learning experience, and you often see across college athletics where coaching staffs or in administration, we have a lot of people who are working for people younger than them. But what I've come to find, this is my first time doing it, is when you have somebody who's competent, who's invested in the people that they employ or that they brought on to help push the vision, then you forget about things like that and you just say, hey, this is just a great leader, and all the other stuff just goes out the window. So that's been my experience, and I couldn't be thankful to be working with or for any better people.
Yeah, and just so people can, I'm sure people will go check it out. Is it frontofficesports.com? No,
it's actually frontofficesports.org.
frontofficesports.org, okay, and then I've looked online, so it's a lot of much like what we do here, but career profiles, takeovers, like you said, and I'm always impressed with you said you've never used it before, but if you pulled it off, Snapchat. I say if you're over 30 years old and you know what you're doing on Snapchat, you're lying. So I'm impressed by that. I'm more of an Instagram stories guy since I'm already on that platform. But anything else? Other resources that the site has?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have obviously the piece where we interview professionals, but we also have contributors who focus on the social media aspect, and they have the Social Media 7, which is one of my favorite parts of the content that goes up, and that's when they just profile who's doing it best around social media. And it's always interesting to see the different messaging that comes across. And over time, we have some more plans in place that we're going to extend, and there's going to be a kind of a slow, gradual release, but I'll let that kind of roll out on its own, and I'll just kind of keep that in the bag for now. But we're definitely looking to expand and grow.
Good. All right, so that's front office sports. Now, what is the blueprint?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the blueprint for a successful career, and the subtitle is a foundation for entry-level development, and it's consistent with everything else. And I started writing this back in 2014, actually, but I actually quit for a while, and I wasn't really just as vested in the project as I thought I would when I first started out. But what happened is I had a special English teacher in high school, and I told her I was going to work on a book, and she was really the first one who really got me trained in the art form of writing. And I wanted to do something to one, kind of speak to my newfound passion for development for young professionals, and also just showcase my writing style because it's different, it's a little bit more poetic and a little more abstract in nature. But I like to kind of paint that mosaic to really help people get up to speed. What I saw prior to writing the blueprint was a lot of material that just said, hey, just go hard work and you'll work hard and network and you'll be fine.
Yeah, go find a mentor. Just go get one.
Yeah. I don't think that's enough. That's not enough. That wasn't enough for me because that wasn't the type of half-hearted mentorship and leadership and guidance that I was given as a grad assistant and as an intern. I had people that were really invested. And to this day, I have a mentor, Ty Brown at AFCA, whom I talk to every single day almost. And we're collaborating on different things. And he's also my co-author of the blueprint. But I really wanted to do something to honor her. And she actually passed away in 2014. And I'd stopped writing the blueprint altogether, before then. But when she passed away, I said, you know what? I'll never let this happen again. I'll never let anything go down or let anybody down with a promise I made them. And in March 2015, I picked my keyboard back up, so to speak, and I reached out to Ty. I said, we need to finish this book. And my English teacher, this was important to her, and I need to finish it in her honor, and I need your help. And here we are today. So That's really where it came from. It was a true dedication to her, but also a dedication to the people, my cohort, and the people that I hope get value from it.
Wow, that's incredible. So how are you pushing the book? I mean, you've obviously indicated who it's marketed toward, but is this available on Amazon? I mean, do you use the front office sports platform to help push it as well?
Oh, absolutely. And the interesting thing about it, I guess I can give a little bit more on the structure of it, is it's a two-part approach. So I write from my perspective as a young professional, and Ty, my co-author, writes from his perspective as a leader, as an organizational kind of expert, and how he got me trained to where I am. And there were some mistakes I made early on in my career that I even outlined in the blueprint. Because I wanted to make sure.
Like what? What were some of those?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you this one, and I'm almost embarrassed to tell it, but it's all about that process. So
sure.
The AFCA experience that changed the trajectory of my career almost never happened. Reason being is because I obviously got the nod for the position, but that wasn't all. It wasn't all butterflies and flowers. How that turned out. What really happened is I had an interview at the AFCA. It was kind of impromptu. They were thinking about opening up the assistantship. They weren't really sure about it. So I threw my name in the hat, had a great interview, and maybe about 3 weeks to a month go by, and I'm not hearing anything back. So I reached out to the program director, at Baylor Sport Management, and I said, hey, haven't heard anything from the AFCA. Any advice or any perspective, insight you can give on that? Well, he said, well, did you follow up? I said, follow what? I said, did you follow up with like a handwritten note or anything like that? I said, not exactly, but I'll get on that. And that just speaks to me not knowing. And if you don't know, you don't know. And I can't really stress that enough. But what I did beyond that is I literally scorched a piece of paper trying to get a handwritten note out to Ty, and hopefully he would accept it and not just, pretty much blacklist me altogether. Thankfully, he accepted it. But what I came to find is even though I got the nod for the AFCA graduate assistantship, it was too little too late. What really got me in the door was the fact that I had a mentor at Ole Miss. And Ty, in the summer that I was up for consideration for that assistantship, he went to a conference, and he saw a gentleman who had a lapel pin representing the Ole Miss logo on his sport coat. And he went up to him just randomly and said, hey, I got this guy. He said he just graduated from Ole Miss. He's looking to come into our organization. I don't know a whole lot about him. Do you have any insight? And he happened to approach my mentor, and he gave me a glowing recommendation, and that's what I found out got me my job. And I said, you know what, I'll never make that mistake again in terms of not taking care of my business on the follow-up front. But also it was good that I had fostered that relationship with my mentor so he could plug me, and that would overshadow the faux pas I had really messed up with.
No, you just thoroughly embarrassed yourself on the podcast. Well, no, I'm kidding. I mean, that's great.
Yeah, man, it's fine.
No.
I want
Hey,
to make it real.
No, I love it. I mean, hey, my first real job with USA Baseball, and I wish this was a joke, but hey, like you said, I got the job. I misspelled my name on the resume.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, you want to talk about basic. So what happened was it was basically it's my fault, obviously, but it was just the byproduct of last minute poor planning. I pull up my resume on the computer and I was going to my USA Baseball interview. So I was typing usabaseball.com on the browser, and as both windows were popping up, the ALL in baseball, as I'm typing the URL, got onto my resume. So my resume, because the cursor starts with the name, right? So the resume read lowercase ALL, capital JAKE for my first name. So I passed my resume across the table to Paul Seiler, the CEO of USA Baseball, and he says, "So is the ALL silent in your name?"
Oh my goodness.
I mean, could you imagine? And at that point, I'm thinking, hey, no chance I get the job. And I said, well, this cannot possibly go any worse. So I pretty relaxed. And he laughed. And then I remember David Perkins, who was also one of the guests on there, stuck his head in. He said, hey, are we ready to go to lunch? And I said, and Paul said, I don't think Jake's very hungry. He misspelled his name on his resume. I mean, it was truly a disaster of epic proportions. But to this day, my nickname with those guys is All Jake. They call me All Jake.
All Jake.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, I'm saying you can spin it. It's all about Jake, right?
Well, that's what I say. That's how I spin it. But at the time, it was definitely not all about me. So, okay. So clearly, you're busy with IMG. You're busy with front office sports. You've got the book. You are so far ahead of, I know, where I was, and I think that you're in a position in your career where a lot of people who are just coming out of school can look at you as someone to aspire to earlier in their career that's got it figured out. And I think it's admirable what you're doing for those young professionals who have a lot of questions. How do I get myself out there? How do I, leverage internships and turn them into full-time jobs and things like that? So, I applaud what you're doing. I applaud you and your colleagues there at Front Office Sports. It's a great site, great social media channels that I encourage people to check out. And, as we wrap this up, I wonder if there's anything you'd want to share, any advice, any authors or social media channels. You talk about who's doing it best in social media earlier. Any recommendations, things for the listeners to check out?
Yeah, absolutely. And granted, I want to make a shameless plug to definitely check out my book, The Blueprint for a Successful Career. And you can obviously get that on Amazon if you just type it in as is. And we also have a website that I'll be willing to share as well. But it all comes down to just being a good person and treating people right. When I was coaching with Baylor Athletic Performance, it was instilled and it was really etched into my brain and psyche to become the number one in the nation at something. And no matter what you're doing, you want to approach that current opportunity with unparalleled vigor, and you want to set the bar out of reach. And that's what I'm seeking to do. At the same time, I want to help other people. That's what it's all about. And I just want to just kind of tell people to keep the faith and understand that it is a process. But if you got into this for the right reasons, then it will go by very smoothly, and just continue to work at a high level. And I'm always open to help. I'm not hard to find on any social media channels, and so just continue doing a great job, and let's really just uplift this industry. And it's important to a lot of people. It brings so many people from so many different backgrounds together in one setting for one purpose, and that's something that you can't really speak to in any other entity or organization. So that's why sports is so special, and we have a duty to make sure it's done the right way for the fans as well as for the professionals who want to carry on the torch.
Will, I want to get up and run through a wall right now. I'm digging this. I'm digging. I like it. I'm sure the people that work around you love it too. It's infectious. So where can people find you on social media? It sounds like Snapchat was maybe a one and done, or did that give you the confidence to get on there more regularly?
I am on Snapchat, but I'm only on there to follow other people when they have interesting things going on.
Sure.
I do not have anything uploaded, but maybe in the future. I see the value in it, but when I do another takeover, I'll get back on. But until then, you cannot find me on Snapchat, but you can find me on Twitter at W_BAGGS, and that's just W_Bags. And I'm also on LinkedIn at Will Baggett, and also you can find me on Facebook at Will Baggett. So any channels that you want to connect with me on, I'm happy to speak with anyone who's willing to reach out.
And what's that Blueprint address you mentioned, the web address?
Absolutely. It's theblueprint.career. It's THE blueprint.career, and it's just a link straight to Amazon, and it has a little bit of information about the book itself. And I'm happy to speak with anyone if they have any particular questions about the scope and the focus of it. And we had Bill Curry. He was fortunate. He was actually gracious enough to do our foreword, and Grant Taft, the former executive director at the American Football Coaches Association, he wrote our afterwards. So definitely some firepower from some selfless individuals who really helped us out with this effort.
Well, there you have it. All right, pick it up. Theblueprint.career. Will, thank you so much for joining us. Again, I thanked you for all the different ways that you're helping both young professionals and people like me who have been in the industry for more than 10 years. So congrats, keep up the good work, and hopefully our paths cross again soon.
Well, Jay, thanks so much. My first ever podcast, outstanding experience. Keep up the great work, and I love what you're doing at Front Office Exchange. Thank you.
Thanks, man, and keep crushing it, and bring me that Chick-fil-A whenever you get a chance. Thanks.
Yes, sir. I got you.
All right, man. Jason Wilmoth, welcome to the Front Office Exchange podcast. How you doing, buddy?
I'm well. Thanks for having me. Glad to join it.
Sure. So have you fixed your LinkedIn picture since you and I spoke last?
No, see, I heard that's kind of the new thing, is like to do the half face thing. I was going for something artistic there, and I felt good about it.
Right. It looks like you truly are on like the edge of the earth, between the water behind you and an eighth of your face being cut off. I mean, it's pretty impressive.
The real story is that my beautiful wife is there on my other side of my shoulder, and I just didn't think it was appropriate to throw her in the
It just
too,
completely erased her. Great. All right, that didn't take long. Colleen is under the bus immediately.
Right.
No, well, hey, seriously, I appreciate you coming on. Obviously, you and I go way back, as I explained to our listeners on the front end. But why don't you start by telling us what your current role is now there at IMG, what your responsibilities are, and then we'll kind of walk backwards from there.
Yeah, sure. So I am Director of Partnership Marketing with IMG College. I'm based in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I really, responsibilities-wise, I'm in charge of a group of accounts, a group of our partnerships, 12, 13, I believe, that activate across a wide number of our school properties, right? So the UPSs of the world, Miller Coors, Geico, work with each of those partners to basically make sure, and with my team, to make sure that we're executing, delivering on their partnerships and trying to find some upsell and renewal opportunities. So.
And how long have you been in that role?
I just passed my 5-year mark.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is it good to be home for those? Obviously, I'm assuming most people that are listening don't know. You are from the area. And again, we'll talk about how you ended up back there. But what's it been like, I guess, personally and professionally, to be back in an area in a role where you're thriving?
It's great, and yeah, clearly thriving. It's awesome personally. I mean, having grown up here, my wife and I are actually from here, but getting back into a role and with a company that's been really rewarding has been fantastic. And then just again, personally, being able to have family and friends here. I got a lot of deep roots here. I remember, I think my first week back, I was having lunch with some coworkers of mine, and I look out, and I think I saw one of my uncles walk by. 10 minutes later, one of my childhood teachers. It was funny.
So you're the mayor.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
So when you hear about these big agencies, you think of the big cities. New York obviously comes to mind. I know you guys have an office in Atlanta and other cities as well. Why Winston-Salem for that office? And do you think that you get more or less interest from people looking for jobs again, whether they're right out of school or at a turning point in their career, because of the quality of life there, the very low cost of living comparatively?
Yeah, no, really, really good question. I guess the first one, the why Winston-Salem, the company was started back in it was '92 under the name ISP Sports when Ben Sutton started it coming out of Wake Forest. That Wake was our first client, but Ben being here in Winston, Wake being here in Winston, it just made sense. And so over the years when we were acquired by IMG and then by WME a few years ago, there was just so much infrastructure here, whether it was the audio setup that we have and all the studios where we broadcast various football, basketball, baseball games throughout the year, but then also our staff. I mean, we have probably 150, 200 or so staff here in Winston.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it's and we've the part of the town that we're in too. We're kind of an anchor in a revitalized area, which is really, really cool. So long story short, a lot of roots there. But the second part of your question, yeah, I mean Winston, it's a little different, right? Like you don't typically hear of good-sized agencies like ours based in cities this relatively small.
Yeah, no airport. Obviously it's close to Greensboro and Charlotte, but really unique spot.
Yeah, totally. And it's the cool thing though is that we're tethered to, we like you mentioned, we've got an office in Atlanta, a sizable office down there. We've got a main office up in New York that our group that I'm a part of is tied closely to. So a lot of our coworkers are up there, but then with all of the different school properties that we have, we're spread out across the country, in markets like Lincoln and Pullman and others. So we're really not just, even though the base of IMG College is here in Winston-Salem, it's again we have coverage across the country, which is great.
Yeah, I'm not going to dare ask you what an average day is like for you. That question's impossible. But let's talk about average month. How much are you traveling? How much are you at events? Do you spend most of the time on the phone with these clients, with the universities? What does a typical month look like?
Yeah, it really depends on the time of year. I mean, right now, probably for us, you get into starting July, really up through February, March, through when the basketball season's wrapping up. That's kind of our busiest time of year. Definitely in the fall around football, but a typical month it varies. I mean, we travel. There's a need depending on which partners we work with. There's a need potentially to be at various games where sponsors are activating, where they have some type of big display or hospitality event for their customers, or sometimes the key decision maker is going to be out and we want to have a little FaceTime and some interaction there. So that's kind of one bucket of where there's a need for us to travel. And then on the other side, we pretty regularly go and meet in person with our clients in their offices. So whether that's strategic planning or recaps or just checking in if we happen to be in town with someone else, there's a little bit of that. So I'd say over the course of the fall, any given year, I'm probably making 3 or 4 trips to games and probably about the same to clients' offices for meetings. So
interesting. So now let's walk it all the way back. Obviously, you got your start in sports business, sports media, broadcasting, all that at Carolina. You and I worked with the play-by-play and color commentary group there, Mick and Woody at UNC. And then from there, you've consistently stayed in sports, but the road has been winding. And a lot of that also has to do with, you mentioned Colleen earlier, and in all seriousness, she also leads a very successful career. So I guess if you could go back to you're coming out of Carolina and just weave in where appropriate, obviously, with how you've moved, keeping in mind Colleen's career as well, because I think that's an interesting piece to how you've just, in a lot of instances, made it work.
Yeah, sure. So I guess on the heels of that internship we had, with the radio network there at Carolina, I had an internship. It kind of all started there with an internship the summer after my junior year at UNC with the Orlando Magic. I still have no idea why they selected me, but I did some phone interviews, applied online, did some phone interviews, and sight unseen, they hired me as an intern for the summer in ticket sales and service. At the time, I wasn't even really sure I wanted to get into sales or really know what I wanted to be when I grew up, but I jumped on it. It was an incredible experience. Crazy story. I actually lived in the house of my boss, sleeping on a mattress in his study off his living room. So that was interesting. But coming out of that, it was cool because I got some experiences doing stuff. I mean, I wasn't out there even selling tickets. I was doing a lot of prospecting and some research projects and things like that. But come senior year of college, I applied for the NBA's associate program, which is like a kind of an entry-level full-time gig that they have up in New York at the league office. And I was able to parlay that experience that I'd had with the Magic into a lot of the interviews that I had, and somehow, again, fortunately got the opportunity to go up to New York for final interview. And just the sheer fact that I was able to reference a few of the names of the executives I'd worked with at the Magic and some of the stuff I did, I think honestly just it was right time, right place. The group that I ended up getting a job with at the NBA was called it's affectionately known as TMBO, Team Marketing and Business Operations. The type of stuff I'd worked on was what they did. And so yes, second semester of senior year, I got the job offer from the NBA, started summer after graduation, and was there 2 years. And incredible experience. It was one where, really our role in a nutshell was where we were the front line for all the NBA teams and the WNBA teams for really helping them sell sponsorships and sell tickets. And my role was one in which I got to review and weigh in on promotions that involved all the teams' logos because the league owned those marks. So there was a system in place where all the teams had to submit all that to the league, and I was on the other end of that. I'd be the first one reviewing it, talking with IP lawyers and folks about the use of marks and how the territories that the teams had to work within were being defined. And long story short, it was a really cool way to see what the teams were doing from a sponsorship angle that worked and what didn't work.
Yeah, let me just jump in because I think people know TMBO. So let me play devil's advocate, and I could be completely off base. But, as you guys being subject matter experts in the space, how would you know what would work for them in their respective markets? Did you have to do market-specific research, or was this almost like a plug and play, like, hey, this works across the board and we suggest you use it in Phoenix and then you go use it in Boston?
Yeah, it was more the latter. It was, we were kind of for lack of a better term, right, best practice aggregators, right? So if we saw that the Utah Jazz, and I distinctly remember this, Utah Jazz did a really cool promotion with, remember, who was it, AK-47, Andrei Kirilenko?
Yeah.
They did a promotion with him where they put his image and everything on a I think it was a lunchbox that they gave away at Jiffy Lube, and it ended up moving the needle, right? Like sold, got more people coming in to get oil changes. So what we were able to do is take that type of example and say, hey, Miami Heat, we know you guys are talking in the auto aftermarket or oil change.
Yeah. If a lunchbox featuring a Russian basketball player can sell in a Salt Lake gas station, this is going to work.
Right. Something tells me Miami might be able to pull it off.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the type of stuff that we did, and we, whether it was through, I think it was weekly newsletters where we would, collect all those best practices, and not just like, hey, this is a really cool promotion that so and so did, but we would work with the teams to get results and say, hey, what were the, number of services sold or the number of items moved, the traffic increases. So hard, tangible numbers like that were able to make it helpful for other teams to say, hey, prospect X, this has worked elsewhere. Give it a shot. We can do it here too.
So, and just because I know a little bit about the personal, knowing both you and Colleen, so here you are in New York. You're doing extremely well. I know I went up and visited you once or twice. Then you're faced with a decision, correct? That was when you had to look at Florida because Colleen was looking at Florida as well.
Yeah, so when we both came out at the same time, Carolina, I was in New York. She was actually in D.C. working or interning at the Washington Post, and so we did the distance thing for a while. We'd catch buses and whatnot up and down, what was it, 95 there. But she ended up landing a gig about a year out of school, back down with, at the time, the St. Petersburg Times, the newspaper down in Florida, Tampa, St. Pete. So we did that distance thing for a while, and we got to the point where, at the time we'd been dating a long time, and we said, all right, let's go ahead and put a ring on it and force our hand, see who's gonna go where. And so for about a year, during the engagement, she looked at grad school opportunities up in the New York metro area. She looked at paper jobs, editor jobs, all that stuff, while I was also looking down in the St. Pete area. And I like to say she ended up winning out. I hadn't found anything. She couldn't find anything up there. And we basically got to the point where the wedding day was approaching, and I didn't have anything, and said, you know what, NBA, this has been a great ride, but I'm gonna take a little leap of faith here and go, not only get married, but move down to Florida and try and find me a job. So.
Wow. Okay. So, just to skip ahead a little bit, you ended up with the Rays, and you'll talk about that. Yeah. But you didn't have that job before you moved?
No. So that was a bit of a challenge and kind of out of my norm. But the thing that I had done though when I was up in New York was I'd worked some connections, right? Like Teambo, as a lot of folks know, is extremely well connected, not just in basketball but elsewhere. And so I talked with a number of folks. I remember Lou DePauli, Bill Sutton, a few other guys whose names may ring a bell in the sports marketing industry, but they helped get me connected and Scott O'Neill too, being another one at the Sixers, but got me connected to some folks just to do some basic networking. And I was able to work off of that a couple trips down to Florida when I was visiting Colleen, and I just set up some informal informational meetings with folks at the Lightning, the Devil Rays at the time, even I want to say another agency or two, and ultimately having kind of planted that seed then, ended up, by the time I moved down to Florida and after I'd gotten married, ended up working out for me. That's when I got a call from the Devil Rays with some interest. So.
Wow. Okay, so you're with the Devil Rays through the transition to the Rays, or no, did that happen after you moved?
Yeah, no, I was there. So I joined at the end of 2004, and then I was there until August of 2011. So I came in at a time when the Rays were pushing 100 losses a year, and then, it was, end of, I know you talked to Brian Killingsworth too, but at the end of 2007 was when we did our whole name change, ownership change, and then the magical season of 2008 when we weren't even supposed to make the playoffs that year, let alone ride it all the way out to the World Series. So
right.
that was a heck of a ride.
And what was your role there? Was it in sponsorship?
Yeah, sponsorship. So when I started out, I was basically
super easy, right? Sales. That was the whole
totally.
thing. The Rays were they led in sales constantly, and huge support from the community, right? That was you guys.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
Absolutely. And those problems are gone in the past now too.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
But especially from the attendance side. But no, what I started out doing was basically a sponsorship activation coordinator, and eventually took on some radio broadcast operations responsibilities too, and then worked my way up to where I was ultimately overseeing the sponsorship activation team, where we were making sure partners, kind of like what I'm doing now, making sure partners were getting what they paid for, but then kind of priming them and looking for opportunities to grow them.
Now, just to educate listeners, does that include a sales component, or are you kind of lockstep with the sales team?
Yes and yes. We're definitely in lockstep. We had to be. But it's more so, no, there's not a set number there wasn't over our head in terms of what we needed to generate from a dollars perspective, but we certainly were expected to be the ones that, managing those accounts on a day-to-day basis. We were the ones who knew the clients best and could identify new opportunities, and could, in some cases, be the lone seller. But it was only beneficial to make sure that we were working with the seller just to get the most out of it.
Right. And I touched on this a little bit with Brian, so I don't want to harp on it, but, did your experience with the Rays equip you so much better than maybe working in that same role with other teams as you've moved on to IMG as it relates to the kind of joke I made earlier about, just the challenges that you face there in the community trying to sell that team in an area where, you're in St. Pete, you're also trying to market to Tampa, but with the traffic, it's difficult. I mean, it's well documented. But do you think that prepared you well for your current role?
Yeah, and no, really good question. I think it did. It's funny at the time you don't really appreciate that, but we had a lot of loyal partners down there, right? We had folks who had the Tropicanas and the Pepsis of the world, and had signed up from day one when the team started, and yeah, I mean they saw some rough times, but at the same time they also saw value in it. And one of our responsibilities was to help make sure they understood that they could still reach and get in front of eyeballs, right? And that they could still get loyal fans in the market to come out to their retail locations and purchase their products and services. So, yeah, I mean, I think when that big windfall hit in the season of end of 07 and really 08, those partners and even some of the new ones who were able to jump on the bandwagon, it was great to have been a part of kind of ushering them through the tough times, but then also it's like, hey guys, now you're going to get rewarded for having stuck through this. And fans, right, recognize that there's equity in having seen you for a while, and now it's like, oh man, I want to, these guys are cool to be associated with.
Yeah, so you've had quite the range of experience. You've got the New York experience, NBA, team level, both baseball and basketball. Just curious, big picture, do you cross paths with any of those former colleagues or people that you worked with now at IMG? Just wondering how small the sports world is.
It's ridiculously small. It's everybody says that. Oh, who you know? It's you need to make sure you network, and you don't want to burn a bridge. But I've lost track of where all I've got so many of those connections, right? I mean, whether it's folks still in that market at other teams, certainly still a lot of contacts there at the Rays, but I've got a number of my buddies that I had down there, my coworkers that I had who are in prominent, executive positions right across Major League Baseball, NBA. It's funny, the guy that hired me, the guy that called me when I just moved down there without a job, the guy that called me after I had 6 months prior had an informational interview with him. Guy ended up hiring me, and now he's a colleague of mine here at IMG. Works out of the Midwest, overseeing sales of a number of school properties. So kind of definitely small world.
Right. It's all sort of worked out. You're back home. You're in a great gig. Would you have done anything differently? Do you wish you would have stayed in New York a little longer, or even had gone at all? Just curious if there were any points as you look back and said, you know what, I wish I would have handled this differently, made a different decision.
No, I don't. I'm not. I like to think I'm one that doesn't really have regrets. I mean, maybe other than not trying out for the PGA and trying to get my card.
Oh, come on now.
But yeah, no. I mean, I'm kind of I'm a firm believer in everything happens for a reason, right? Like I like that. I jumped out on a limb a little bit and spent 2 years up in New York, and then took a big leap of faith and went and hung out down in Florida to work on my tan for a few years, right? Like it to me, it's all built up an experience for me that's allowed me to get back to where I'm at now. But no, I don't think there were ever any big opportunities that I had that I passed up, or frankly any decisions that I made where I was afterward thinking, oh geez, that sent me the wrong direction.
Yeah, and just to go back a little bit to the day-to-day question, can you compare for me, for the listeners, what agency life is like compared to working for a team? Now, obviously, you're not at the ballpark 81 nights out of the year, but I got to think that in different ways, potentially work-life balance is better, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
It is, and now, I mean, it from like a work-life balance.
Which doesn't exist, by the way, so let's just get that out of the way.
It does not.
Yeah,
That's right. Actually one of the funniest things I've ever heard.
Paige and I always talk about work-life integration. So I would I would drag her to the ballpark as much as possible. So it was great for me, but I'm sure it was the worst integration ever for her. But anyway.
Colleen, to that point, sidebar, Colleen always used to give me a hard time when I'd come home from the trop, which I did. I've done the math. I think over the 7 years I was there, I went to, attended, worked, however you want to say it, more than 500 games.
Goodness.
But I would come home from the ballpark, and I had this smell on me that just from concession stands and all the different food and beer and whatever else is just floating around the ballpark,
right.
which makes it what it is. But anyway, I just thought of that.
So that's the take home for listeners, is that the difference
pretty much
in working
avoid
at
the smell.
Right, you smell better. Okay.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, focus on that. No, it's different, and it's funny. Like I get that question a lot. What's it like working at a league and a team versus an agency? To me, IMG is actually, at least in the role I'm in, is almost more similar to working at the league, working at the NBA, where than it is a traditional agency. And it's because in both spots we're kind of in the corporate headquarters where all of our tentacles, all of our arms out there working with the different, whether it's teams, whether it's school properties, we're doing it centrally and kind of having to operate remotely and trusting and working through our boots on the ground, right?
Right.
Whereas at the team, you are the boots on the ground. You're the one controlling, how everything works. There are fewer approvals you've got to get. There's fewer mandates and guidelines from the league, but you're also living and breathing and supporting one product on a day-to-day basis. So that, to me, that's the biggest difference. I mean, we at IMG we certainly still have what you would consider traditional agency roles, right? Where there's a little bit of strategy, there's a little bit of execution metrics, right? Like a lot of those buzzwords still come into it, but it's certainly more so of a kind of a 30,000-foot view while we work through other resources we have.
Got it. So what is next for you now? You can be career IMG, definitely, but just, I guess, take a step back. Doesn't necessarily need to be Jason Wilmoth, but let's just say somebody in a position like yours within IMG. What have you seen over the last 5 years? Do you see some of your peers and other offices going on to bigger roles with teams, with leagues, with brands, or is IMG trying to build, just like every company? This is a dumb question, but do you see not a lot of turnover within IMG?
No, I think there's a fair amount of turnover, but to me it's almost natural, right? Like to
Sure.
me that's at times and hopefully a good sign of people growing and being able to take on other opportunities. So, I mean, for me, like in our role as a service provider, for partners, for me and people like me in a position like this, I mean, ultimately, you have the opportunity to potentially sell at some point. I mean, because we've been able to get really good experience from just knowing inventory, knowing the value of it, knowing how ROI is defined by partners, in addition to the day-to-day relationship management side of things. I mean, that's a pretty good portfolio to be able to take a next step into developing sponsorships. But then a lot of folks in roles like this want to continue to stay more on the servicing activation side of it. And I have colleagues of mine that when I worked in baseball and counterparts of mine at other teams that ultimately rise up to the ranks of VP or director of client service for a team or for a league, and that even stretches into traditional ad agencies. I know and have worked with folks that take their sports background and apply it to that and go after an ad agency where you're working on a number of accounts and you're that strategy person, right? Like you're the one that's in charge of managing the account, but also taking ideas to the client around how they can best execute their partnership and platform. So the thing I like about it is that there's a lot of different opportunities, right? It's not just a scripted, okay, here's what you do for 2 years and then 3 years and then that's it. It opens the door, and then even here at WME IMG, there's a lot more than just college. So I like that we're able to touch some of that stuff and get exposed to it, and then potentially consider that for a next step.
Right. Now let's flip it around. This episode is going to start with Will Baggett, who's down in your Atlanta office. He's someone who's right out of school. What do you look for in your role, Jason, as you're hiring, recent graduates or even someone who's maybe, 28 to 32 and is looking to transition to the agency side because, frankly, they've been in baseball and basketball and they're worn out a little bit?
I look for, I want someone that can cover all the basics, right? I mean, in any job, right? Sports, whatever, in any job, should want folks that can come in and, be organized and be able to multitask and be an effective communicator, right? I mean, that's kind of just the basics. What I tell a lot of folks that I interview is, the ideal person that's going to come in and get this job is someone who is going to have all that, who's going to do it with a smile, but who's also going to raise the bar for other folks that they work with, right? Like I want someone to come in and just start hitting the ground running and throwing out ideas and really questioning why things are done the way that they are, so that their peers are kind of raising their eyebrows thinking, you know what, I need to step up my game. And I know that's really big picture. It's not too specific, but if you hire someone who's going to do that, you're ultimately going to make the rest of the team better. And again, you're gonna be moving everybody in the right direction. So, you want all that normal stuff, right? But at the same time, you can go get anybody on the corner and come in and teach them how to execute and how to go find the answers. But what you can't teach is, are things like that, the intangibles, the things that are going to make people stand out.
Right. So when I gave you a little bit of prep for this, as we wrap up here, when I gave you prep, you warned me that you don't read, you don't do social media, you don't do any of that, so I can't ask you any of those questions. I've never had someone vet my questions harder, Jason, to be completely honest.
It depends on how you define reading. I mean, I think I've memorized good night construction site.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started.
One fish, two fish.
No, but in all seriousness, so, I know not everybody is all over social media and all these places, but you've learned, you've gained experience and advice somehow, whether that be mentors or your peers now. Along those lines, what do you kind of attribute your kind of continual professional growth outside of IMG to?
I think it's a number of things. Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of good mentors along the way. I mean, bosses and coworkers of mine that have given me, have empowered me, have given me some rope to run with, have allowed me to make some mistakes, have allowed me to take on some ownership of stuff when maybe I wasn't quite ready, but I feel like that's allowed me to get where I'm at. I think one piece of advice that I got from a former boss of mine, it was kind of cool. I mean, you and I are the same way. Like, we're competitive by nature, and this really, hit home. But he said, in your professional career, even outside of that, right? Whenever you're just interacting and communicating with folks, play the point game. So, in other words, try and score points with someone when you follow up with them proactively, right? So if you're having a conversation and your boss or a peer of yours asks you to do something, or delegates or assigns something to you, you score a point when you follow back up before they have to check with you, right? You score a point by being proactive and keeping things moving. They score a point when they beat you to it, and they have to ask you what the status is of something, or they have to follow back up with you on something before they've heard from you. And the goal of the game is win, right? Like, don't let them score points. And it sounds kind of silly, but if you think about it, it's really applicable to what we do in just business in general, right? Like, you want to be that guy, that girl that's proactive and keeping things moving and not having to have people follow up with you. And if you are, you're going to be more efficient, you're going to be more effective in how you communicate, and just ultimately getting things done. So that's always something that's stuck with me, and something I certainly share with folks, on my team.
That is really good stuff. Is the person that gave you that advice Malcolm Gladwell? I feel like that's like one of those super simple things that all of a sudden becomes a book. I mean, that's great.
He very well may have gotten it from there. He was the type of guy that was big into reading those types of things. So I definitely got to give him credit for that.
Wow, very cool. Okay, so I know you're a golfer, so this question will work for you, but I'm not going to let you choose any Tar Heels. So that includes Michael Jordan, because everybody keeps leaning on him. But say you're going out to golf and you could pick 3 people to round out a foursome. I'll add this. 1, where do you want to play? Just curious if you've got a favorite course. And then 2, who would those 3 people be, whether they're athletes or executives, your peers, people that you've worked with, but in the sports world, who would they be?
Wow. You took one off the Carolina.
That's too easy at this point, yeah.
I know. And it wouldn't have been Jordan, by the way. I would say, and I'm going to take the easy route because, as you said, I'm a big golfer and I love it, especially with the Ryder Cup going on right now. It's top of mind.
Right.
I would definitely say Jack Nicklaus. To me, greatest of all time. I mean, Tiger's right there underneath him in his heyday, but I still think Jack's got it. I'd say Bubba Watson. He and I, I'll just say, have a lot in common. And, geez.
I'll let you off the hook. Colleen?
Yeah, well, obviously. I mean, we'll go with that one. Just
right, there you go. All right, so you went all golf. You went safe. No, but that's good. And then just in terms of events, I mean, now you see a lot of great college events. You've been involved with the playoff runs with the Rays and NBA. Do you have a favorite event or a couple favorite events or venues or things like that that just have been memorable for you over the years?
Yeah, I didn't answer the other question you asked earlier. Where would I play? It would be Augusta, and I guess a good segue to this question. That I was fortunate enough to go a few years ago on the Saturday to the Masters, and by far the most incredible sporting event that I've ever been to. Best sporting experience ever. And so I would play there if I could, and I'd go back. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to go to a lot of the big events over the years, the big 4 events, but to me, that's the event that I kind of model everything after. That's the one that's up on the pedestal. I mean, it lived up to the hype and then some, and I'd go back in a heartbeat and do it again.
Very cool. Now, I know you said that social media isn't your thing, but in all seriousness, online, if people wanted to connect with you or catch up with you, what's the best place to find you?
LinkedIn. I mean, if my image there, my photo there doesn't
Edge of the
really,
Earth, Wilmoth.
Yeah,
got it. Okay.
Yeah. Then that's where all the juicy content is. That's the best way to probably get in touch with me.
Yeah, right.
Unless you want to try and track me down on Instagram and Facebook, where you're pretty much just going to see images of my kids doing stupid things. That's probably the best spot for me.
Sounds about right. But, well, hey, Jason, thank you very much for joining us. It's been awesome to kind of watch your career develop over the last decade plus. And, again, knowing you personally, you and Colleen, the fact that you've both been able to make it work personally and professionally has been a lot of fun to watch. So thank you for joining us today, and continued success there at IMG.
I appreciate it, man. Back at you.
Thanks for listening to the Front Office Exchange, where you hear about the careers of some of the leading executives in sports business. Visit us at frontofficeexchange.com, on Facebook at Front Office Exchange, and on Twitter at Front Office EXCH to access past episodes, show notes, and much, much more.